Hi there, and welcome back to the Hub of Junior Golf Podcast. I'm Ryan Burr with the founder of the Junior Golf Hub, Roger Nick. And Roger, an exciting time of year for sure in golf as fall is in the air, some cooler conditions down south, but everyone's certainly excited about the game and the direction of it. Really want to take today's episode, Roger, and do our best to try to explain the ranking system that currently works in junior golf, how it pertains to players, how early they should be conscious of it, how they should manage it, how concerned they should be with it, and, of course, how colleges use it ultimately to start their recruiting process. And I think that's probably the first step, Roger, is we have so many college coaches on it. They all say the same thing. They are not married to the ranking system, but because of the sheer mass of players that are playing junior golf, and more importantly, their budgets and recruiting budgets, it is a really good spot for all colleges. And that goes from Stanford all the way down to your Division II, Division III, NAIA. They all kind of start with that Junior Golf Scoreboard. And if you're not familiar with it, you will be by the end of this episode. But that seems to be the starting point, Roger, for everyone. Is that healthy?
Well, how do you say not really without really making a big stink of junior golf rankings? I mean, at the end of the day, Ryan, you're right. I mean, it starts somewhere. You have to start somewhere. College coaches have to think about all the things that go into recruiting a player coming in. And it's pretty easy. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, I think Mac and the guys at Junior Golf Scoreboard has made it pretty easy on the rankings and finding the top 1,000 players out there. And so if I'm a coach, I'm going to go and I'm going to look for the top rated or ranked players, men and girls and boys, and I'm going to start there. And then I can start doing some due diligence on, what tournaments are they playing in? How do they actually follow up? So I think it's a natural starting point, and I think that's what we hear from so many of the coaches. It's a good starting point. Is it fair? Who knows, right? At the end of the day, it's just 1 point. It's kind of like taking the ACT or SAT score. Now it's a super score. We don't get a super score ranking, but
Well, let's start with the good. And probably the best part of Junior Golf Scoreboard as a ranking system is you can see every tournament that every player has played in the last 365 days. So let's start with that. It's only a 365-day ranking system. So let's say if you played an event on October 1st, 2022, on October 1st, 2023, that comes off. You no longer see that tournament listed when you click on your boy or girl's name and you see all the tournaments they've played. It's a calendar year, but those tournaments are still part of their ranking. Now they do come off. So let's say you had a first place finish of a good tournament in October 1st, 2022. On October 1st, 2023, you're going to lose that victory. It's similar to what you will see on the PGA Tour with the world ranking, or really similar to tennis. They work on a calendar year where you'll see a player go from number 1 in the world to number 20 in the world just because they lose that win that they had in that previous 365 days. But from a standpoint of being able to accumulate information, it has every kid's year resume. So that's probably the best part about it. As a parent, as a coach, you can actually see there's no way for the child to keep their score out of it. Those scores are reported and they're accurate.
Yeah, no, they are. I mean, it's a good, again, back to it's a good starting point. I don't think it's the end all be all, and I think college coaches will tell you the same thing. I think the scary part about it all is in rankings, when you're talking about rankings with junior golfers and parents, is it how do I play the ranking game, right? And that's something I would love to hear Mac, talk about a little bit if that's what he sees. But we see it, you and I see it. We hear it from parents, and
I played it, Roger. I mean, I was an all-star player. I was an MVP player of how to play the system. I figured the system out and I played the system. Yeah. There's 1,000% that and we'll ask Mac, but there's no way when this thing started, he knew that it was going to become to the point where people were trying to figure out a system on and how to build a ranking. And the very unfortunate part about that, and you and I have had this discussion, and this is where, maybe not, we'll get a resolution today, but you now, as we know, have families choosing not to play events because it's not about the competition. It's about, well, this, no matter how my child does, it's going to hurt their ranking. And listen, there should never be a tournament that you play that you win or play well at, as long as the yardage is legitimate. Now, if you're a 17-year-old and you go play a 4,000-yard golf course and shoot 59, I'm with you. That should not be credited as a good win. But if you're playing the right yardage on a good golf course, I get competition matters. You face the pressure of facing other good players, but you go out on a 7,000-yard golf course if you're a boy, or 6,100 on a girl, and you shoot a good score, just because there weren't a ton of quote-unquote highly ranked players, I'm not sure you should be penalized for that, Roger.
Yeah, no, and that's the toughest thing about it. But, the big thing here too, Ryan, is think about how many, players don't get a chance to play in recognized fields or stronger fields around the country. I mean, we see it all the time. I mean, heck, I think you and Noda have done a great thing with the MB3 championship and the meritocracy of, growing into a better player, right? So you earn your way in. But that's very difficult, right? Because, again, not every good player is going to want to go play in a qualifier somewhere and potentially not get through, which then will hurt their ranking. And I think that's the thing that I think a lot of parents are, to your point, the A player here, figured out, right? You figured out that, hey, if I play in this event, Caden, his ranking isn't going to go down. It's going to stay here. Even if he finishes top 20, the strength of the field is good enough, right? So you figured that all out. I think like anything that we ever do in the history of humans is that if you create a ranking, you create a list, we're going to figure out a way to actually, improve ourselves in it, right? I mean, that's just what we do. I don't think this is anything different. It's just like the SAT or ACT, where it used to be you take the test and you are what you are, right? Now it's a super score. Now it's you can elect to take part of it versus all of it. And so it's going to be part of the game, I think, for a while until something else happens. Who knows, right? I mean, I know with JGS, it's a big part of the junior landscape right now. Obviously, we talked about a few weeks ago, WAGR ranking becoming now even just as big a part of the junior golf landscape, because now they're college coaches are looking at what are they doing above junior golf, right? I mean, I want to recruit the really top players. And I think part of that too, I wonder, Ryan, how this fits in and why WAGR is becoming so much more popular in so many ways because of the transfer portal, right? So Junior Golf Scoreboard, board and the rankings, it's all well and good, but these coaches now are going to the transfer portal, getting kids who's already participated in some college events. They're transferring over, so it's less relevant for them.
Yeah, there is no doubt that the college recruiting game has been massively influenced in all sports by the transfer portal, including golf. But we've talked to coaches that are looking at the portal. We've talked to coaches that aren't interested in it, that are going to stick with building a program with freshmen and seniors leaving and having that consistency. It's easy to say that there's a flaw in a system. But if you're going to say there's a flaw in a system, you at least need to have some ideas of how it can be improved. So I'll shine the spotlight on you, Roger. I have some ideas myself, but there's never going to be a perfect system. The AJGA, they have a ranking system too that is a pretty good one, except for the fact that it only includes players that play their events. So
right,
it massively misses on a giant portion of the population. Junior Golf Scoreboard does get everybody, as long as your tournament is 36 holes. And we should preface, for those of you that don't know what Junior Golf Scoreboard is, if your son or daughter plays 3 36-hole tournaments in a year, they will get a ranking, not only in the entire junior golf landscape, meaning if you're 12 years old and you play those 3 events, you will have a ranking out of every junior golfer, including seniors in high school, including the number 1 junior golfer in the world. Your son or daughter will have a ranking against them. Now, it might be 3,000, it might be 300, but maybe 10,000. I mean, it depends on how many players there are and how many you play. It then goes down to, you can also see your ranking for your graduating class. So if you are a 7th grader, you play those 3 events, 36 holes, 3 times in a year. Not only will you have the rank of the entire system, which really, especially if you're in grade school, it's meaningless because you're comparing yourself against seniors in high school, but you will get your class rank, which I always felt interesting because we all live in our own little bubble. And it is interesting when you do pop on the class and you see, wow, there's a kid in Maine, or there's a kid in Minnesota that is, top 5 JGS, Junior Golf Scoreboard. Now, whether they are or not, it's impressive that people from different parts of the country have been able to get that kind of ranking. It will then go another step further, which the last thing you can step on is your personal state. So if you live in Connecticut, a small number of players, or smaller just because of the state's population, but you can click on, my graduating year is 2028. I live in Connecticut. You hit return, and it's going to give you the 2028 class in the state of Connecticut, every player that has played at least 3 tournaments that are 36 holes or more. So that's kind of how the system works. Is there something that could be added, Roger, not to put you on the spot, but we do tackle issues here on the Hub of Junior Golf. So, we're not going to sugarcoat it. What could improve the system in your mind?
Well, that's a big question, Ryan. Obviously, with the Junior Golf Hub that we have, I mean, we look at it as a score system based on the tournament, just the golf course itself versus the competition. However, again, back to your point, it's kind of hard when coaches are looking at how do you play against someone else, right? That's a little bit better because that's what they do. I think the hard part there is just kind of coming up with what would be better. I would say, do you have an index? Do you know where your skills are? Can I compete in an event that tells me that I'm playing against kids my skill level, so that when I grow or develop, does it actually help me select the right event so I can move a little bit further up the ladder, if you will, without having to maybe take a step back and withdraw from events, so that I don't have a black eye in my ranking. So that way coaches can see, hey, this kid is a developing player. Here's where they are. We know he or she's in this box. They're playing up, or maybe they're playing down. So they actually have a way to see if they're actually playing up to the competition or playing down to just improve maybe some, playing skills.
Well, my first problem with that, Roger, no offense.
No, I love it.
Is all any coach tells their student in the game of golf. I'm talking every coach. You're only playing the golf course. First of all, you're only in a threesome, so you only even know what the score of 2 other people on the golf course is. What someone that teed off an hour ahead of you or an hour behind you, how you should be affected by what they do, when all we preach in the game of golf is shot by shot, you're playing the golf course.
One shot at a time, baby.
So I guess like basketball, I get it, Roger. If you're guarding me and a coach is watching and I can't get past you and you block my shot every time, but the previous 3 games I scored 40, but they come to watch and I can't beat you. Okay. I don't understand how, if I tee off at 9 o'clock and you tee off at 11 o'clock, how what you being in the field has any bearing on what my ranking should be. I don't know your name. I don't know what car you're in, what clubs you drive, what color you're wearing. I know nothing about you. And I will promise you this, I will not have seen you one time. Even my eyes have on the rain. I will not have seen you once, Roger.
Yeah.
How should I be affected by you?
I know, but Ryan, that is the dilemma, right? This is the difference between other sports as well. So think about being recruited in football. You're on a high school football team that loses every single game, right? But you have the skills and talent that somebody recognizes that, man, this kid is so special. He stands out amongst a 0-10 team, right? And has no stats whatsoever because his team is so bad. But yet he still gets recruited. And again, it goes back to the ability or their ability to recognize skill and saying, how would that skill fit into the next level or their program, when they recruit them? And I think that's the thing that I think golfers tend to miss because we're trying to win a golf tournament versus we're playing to develop our skills to then be recognized to say, I have the potential to play and win events or have good scores to contribute to a team later on in their careers. And I think if we looked at it from a developmental standpoint, it may be much different because now, to your point, I don't care. I don't care what you actually shoot, but then I have to, because if I don't beat you in the event, guess what? I have now lost out on any opportunity for a coach to recognize my skills. And again, I'm 13 and you're 17. Is that, that's kind of how we're looking at this. And yeah, we can go back to the class, but it doesn't show up necessarily because you're only being ranked based on your finish, not based on your skills, or because you might be, again, you might be playing above where your level is, or you might be playing below just because maybe you're coming back from an injury. Maybe you're just trying to figure it out. Maybe it's not a PGA Tour. It's not a PGA Tour elevated event, right? So you're trying to figure those things out. So I think it's at some point, I do think that we have to recognize player development is different all over the place, right? And how do we actually fit that into some way?
Well, with that, we welcome in the founder of Junior Golf Scoreboard, Mac Thayer. Mac, thanks so much for joining the Hub of Junior Golf podcast, the gold standard of podcasts in the junior golf industry, as we are paving a pathway for parents on the junior golf game to understand junior golf, understand the systems that exist, and ultimately help them understand by having college coaches on, having instructors on, having people like yourself have a better understanding of what junior golf is all about. So thanks for joining us, Mac. Let's just start with a little history lesson, if you will. Many of our listeners and viewers, every Monday, their parents and kids alike are hopping on Junior Golf Scoreboard to see what happened with the rankings. How did this system come to be?
Well, we actually the Junior Golf Scoreboard is 25 years old this year, and I think we started doing rankings about 22 years ago when we had enough data to do it. And we looked around and the systems that were available, and we got to remember, we're talking back at the beginning of the internet too. We're talking about the late 90s. So about the only thing that existed was the Golf Week points system, which they don't use anymore. And so it was a question of, if we were going to do rankings, how do we do that? And what's the best way to do it? And we interviewed a lot of people, and mostly college coaches, because we knew we would be an attraction to them. And they basically said, Mac, whatever you do, base it upon getting the ball in the hole. That's what they wanted. That's what golf is about. I mean, you can take away all the other stuff around the game, but the game is about getting the ball in the hole. I mean, that's where it's at. So that's how it started, was building a system that was based around doing that. How do you score on a golf course?
And certainly, at the top of the podcast, we talked about it, and I said for me personally, the biggest win for me of Junior Golf Scoreboard is that as a coach, as a parent, as a player, you can see every single score of a player that played, at least 3 36-hole events in a calendar year, and there's no way to hide it. There's certainly, if a player withdraws, that's on there. I mean, there really is for everyone a great system of information of thousands and thousands of players on how they did getting the ball in the hole. So I think we all agree that is probably the best part of Junior Golf Scoreboard. I know it has been something that I check all the time to see how people are playing. So, okay, get the ball in the hole, list the scores. College coaches are interested. It's going to identify who's using the least amount of strokes to put it in the hole. What's the next step of your ranking system?
Well, then the next step, the rankings, you got to play, just to correct you for a second, you got to play 4 or more tournaments within a 365 day, and you got to have at least 8 rounds. So if you have a weather shortened tournament in there, you won't be ranked. But that's a minuscule piece of data. Anyway, the next 65% of the ranking system is based upon getting the ball in the hole. I mean, it's by far and away the most important part as far as weighting is concerned. The next 25%, which is the strength of field. And that's based upon how good the competition was you played against. So you can see right off the bat that getting scoring is almost 3 times more important in the system than the strength of field. And so that's the next step. And that's just based upon the caliber of the players that are in the field, that we take a look at the whole field and we look at the top half of the field and we say, okay, how good were these players, and do some math mumbo jumbo, which I won't bore your audience with. And we figure out how strong that field is. And that changes all the time, by the way, because, players may leave that tournament and go and play better, particularly in the summertime. And so we will retroactively recalculate the strength of field for that tournament, and vice versa as well. They go and play worse, and obviously they weren't as good as they said they were during that tournament. So that's a number that changes all the time. And then the last 10% is based upon finishes. They're not worth very much mathematically. And the finishes are, it all depends upon how many kids played in the tournament. So you know full well that a top 15 finish in a AJGA is better than a win in a small, what I call Coke and hot dog tournament. And so we pretty much, the finishes are there. They're on the chart. You can see them. So, having them. So if you win a tournament, you're going to get credit for it. It gives you a little bit of a pop, but it really isn't worth very much. It's all about, as I said, getting the ball in the hole and who you played.
Okay. Let's touch on quickly competition, because I think that is interesting. It's something that a player can't really control. You sign up for a tournament because you want to play golf, because you love golf. That's your sport. You maybe want to play high school golf. Maybe you want to play college golf. Maybe you want to become a professional. That is something you can't control as a player and a parent, is who else is deciding to play in that tournament. The other thing you can't control is, let's say Roger shoots is 65. Let's say, Mac, you shoot 80, and let's say I shoot 90. The 3 of us are together. We're the first tee time off. 2 hours after we tee off, there are 3 players that are 1, 2, and 3 in the world. We will not have seen them at any point on the golf course. We won't have seen them at the driving range. We won't have seen them in the tournament. We'll be in our car going home before they're done. I get in other sports competition when I want to see, if we're playing basketball, I want to see how you guard me, Mac, and I want to see how I guard you if I'm a coach. But in golf, because of the system of just 3 players playing together at a time, how does competition really matter when we're not competing against the players that tee off 2 hours after us? We're of course all playing the same golf course, but it's not a true sense of mano-a-mano competition.
But that's true. It's an individual sport. I mean, let's face it. Nobody guarding you. Nobody's hitting a tennis ball back at you over the net. You're not, getting, tackled or whatever as you would have in any other team sport. Is true. But there is a factor, I think, Ryan, that clearly the players who are going to an AJGA event, as opposed to a player playing on a, let's say, golf, nothing against Golf Week, but or any one of the other tours, you're not playing the competition. There's a little bit of an intangible factor to the caliber of the competition, and also in the tournaments, by the way, where the caliber of the competition is higher, and the AJGA is a perfect example. They set up the golf courses a lot differently. I mean, there's a different course setup philosophy in better competitions than there are in maybe other tours. There's so many factors of how tours set up things, but I think as a kind of an intangible part to that that, boy, I'm in the field and this is a tough field. I'm going to really have to play my best. So I do think there's a pressure factor there when you start getting up. And certainly, it also may be a little bit of optics too with parents. Not that I do anything because parents want it. Trust me. That's slope.
Well, Mac, I mean, one of the tough thing is like in the movie Kicking and Screaming, and Robert Duvall says, between Saturday and Sundays and 9 a.m. and 4 p.m., this is the Super Bowl of soccer, right? I mean, so I think every parent probably feels, to your point of the Coca-Cola hot dog tournament is the World Series of golf for them. Potentially, for maybe many factors, which is maybe they can't afford to go play in an AJGA event and so forth. So, that's the real sticky point, I think, in a lot of this is that, we hear, and I'm sure you do, and from parents all the time, which is, well, this is just what I have. It's what I know. I can't go anywhere else. And that does become a problem when it gets to rankings and golf. And again, unlike most other sports where you're playing against the competition. So
that's true, and I think it's I get the parents who have the superstars as kids supposedly, and they say well, I'm not going to play that tournament because it hurts my Junior Golf Scoreboard ranking. Well, come on, you can't manage that to begin with. Yeah. You can't avoid small fields. I mean, you would all agree that staying away from small fields is not going to help strength of. I mean, playing in a small field is not going to help your strength of field. I mean, it just isn't. But other than that, you can't manage that. I mean, my answer to every parent who gives me that kind of talk is, go play the golf course.
Yeah. To that point, I mean, actually, here's a question: is because in the Northeast, and it's gotten a lot better for sure. For many years, having been here for a long time, there were a lot of fields that were just small. I mean, there just wasn't enough competition around, right? So, but yet a kid will go out and shoot a really good score on a really difficult golf course that most people in the world would never understand how difficult Sunningdale Country Club is if you've never been there or been in the area, but then gets penalized for doing so. And I think that, and I don't mean it in a negative way that, you or rankings or anybody else is doing it. It's just because the field is so small, and all of a sudden they get discouraged about how they play or where they play if they can't afford to go play elsewhere. So what do we do? What kind of solution would you recommend for that?
Well, first of all, let's talk about, not to get too geeky and nerdy here, okay, but let's talk about that. First of all, it is only 25%. Okay. Second of all, the player probably has numerous tournaments that they play in, right? And to play in one week field thing because they haven't played in a while and they're getting ready to get their summer schedule going and they need to get on a golf course and they need to get their game in shape, and it's the course that matters. In the math, if you have 20 rounds in your system, some from last year, playing in one tournament, it's not going to affect your strength of field number that much. Just mathematically, it doesn't matter. It might move it a couple points. But the time the strength of field only makes a difference is when there's a difference between two players of 20. I call them points. I don't know if that's the right word, but a difference of 20. So if a kid has a strength of field number, let's say, of 70, all right, he's not going to get chased down by some kid who has a strength of field of 65. I mean, it's just not happening. If that kid has a strength of field of 40, and this kid has a strength of field of 70, then that might make a difference in where they're ranked. But I don't know if you're going here with this question, but I'm going to tell you, I'm spending a lot of time telling parents two things. Pay attention to your grad year rank. That's what matters when you're being recruited. The overall rank can matter to get into tournaments. I realize that. But in general, if you're thinking about college recruiting, it's your grad year that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
No coach ever recruits a kid based upon the number to the left of their name. Okay? It does. I mean, yes, if you're talking about a kid who's ranked 10th in this class versus a kid who's ranked 250.
Yeah.
Okay. But no coach is recruiting the kid who's ranked 195 over the kid who's ranked, 205 just because of that. There's too many other factors that are involved. There are way too many other factors. I try to tell parents to stay focused within a band of 50. Just try try to move up in a band of 50. How do you do that? Get the ball in the hole, okay? Take a look at the rankings. Subtract 2 from your differential, which is 1 stroke per 9, right? Subtract 2 from your differential. Run your finger up the rankings to a differential that's too low, and look how much you're going to move. I mean, and to talk about one tournament or even 2 tournaments when you're playing like 6 or 8 tournaments in strength of field, it's not, mathematically, it doesn't matter. Now, if all you can play is the XYZ tour that comes through Connecticut, and all they have is, particularly for girls, all they have is like 6 girls in the event, and that's all you're playing. Yeah, you can still do okay if you play well, but your strength of field is going to be 100, over 100. I mean, it's no getting around it. And so, but I'll tell you what, it's if you have, for a girl, if you can get your scoring differential, Roger, I don't know, maybe you can agree with this or not, but you get your scoring differential under 2 or under 1.7, you're going someplace.
No doubt. No doubt about it.
You're even 2.5.
Yeah.
You're going someplace.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to point out as we've had, we've had Stanford's coach, we've had Florida's coach, we've had Boston College, we've had Connecticut, we've had BYU. I mean, the coaches we've had on this program. And we stress this to the parents that JGS for every coach is their starting point.
Right, exactly.
Every single coach, at the end of the day, every single coach is going to either at 99.9 are going to come watch you in person, and for the less than 1% that aren't, they're watching a lot of video. Yeah. And like you said, where that ranking is, once they actually are that invested in you, they're going to look at your swing. They're going to look at your person. They're going to look at have a conversation with you, your grades. There's so many things that go into it. But JGS, it is a reality, parents, that it is the starting point for every Division I, Division II, Division III NAIA coach because of budgets and because of the ease of being able to, for lack of nothing else, it accumulates every tournament they've played, which is really important information. Mac, could you ever imagine, though, and I know this has become a bit of a epidemic, if you will, with Junior Golf Scoreboard. It is the buzzword on the street with parents, with players, that I'm sure you never imagined that this day would come, but you now have players, if they get off to a bad start, that simply withdraw after 3, 4, 5 holes if they made a couple double bogeys and everyone is pretty upfront about it. It's because of my Junior Golf Scoreboard ranking. I know that is not what you intended, so I'm not putting that on your shoulder, but could you ever imagine that the rankings would matter so much that someone paid $400 for their son or daughter to play in a tournament, and after 3 or 4 bad holes, they're going to drive home because they're worried about their ranking?
Well, we have good people like Roger Nick who have clients, and if they ever do that, Roger's all over them in a heartbeat. Right, Roger?
That's right, Mac.
You're on them. You're totally on them. I mean, that's you're not going to be a client of mine. You start doing that kind of stuff. That's not good for anybody. Here's the deal with that, Ryan. As you know, you can see kids that do that on our website. There's no mathematical penalty for it, but it's there for everybody to see. We send out an annual letter every year to all 150 or so golf organizations that report to us. And we ask them for a voluntary compliance not to put up with that anymore. And we've been doing it for 6 or 7 years. It was really epidemic several years ago. Now it's a lot less. It's a lot less. And I'll tell you a couple of things. First of all, we asked the tours to be very strict about WDs, no cards, DQs, no shows, and all that kind of stuff, which are the things that we record. If a kid doesn't turn in a scorecard, unless they have an observable and verifiable injury or reason, they should report that no card. Okay, and I can tell you the tours, like the Florida Junior Golf Tour, they have a 0 tolerance for that. And they will, and I'll get, sometimes with tournaments, I'll get 3 or 4 no cards for them. And we put them right up there on the internet. Now, if they've already played a round, if they played one round, okay, and then they start the second round and don't finish it, the first round still counts. They don't. If a kid walks away from a tournament and he's turned in an official scorecard and signed it, and that score is recorded, that score is going into their ranking. So they don't get out of it altogether if they've already recorded a round. Now, if they do it in the first round, then you get a no card. So we asked the tournament, and the tournaments have really appreciated it. It's voluntary. I can't make the tours do it. Some of them don't want to make parents mad, whatever the reason is. But most of them, including the Golf Week Tour in the Midwest, literally took text out of our letter and put it on their tour policies. Say, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. And so it took them out of the reason to try to be a doctor, whether or not your wrist really hurts that much. If your wrist really hurts that much, go get a patient first receipt that you got treated for it, and then we'll change it to a WD. So it's pretty much, the tours love it. I mean, we really sort of, they even say, hey, I've got to do it this way because the Junior Golf Scoreboard says I have to. Well, it's like
I've actually heard that at the first tee before. So,
so we're trying to, now, statistically, Ryan, we're ranking 14,000 kids. Okay. If it's a 1% problem, okay, that's 140 families doing that. There aren't 140 families doing it. They just aren't, okay? Unless the tournaments are hiding it from us, which they don't want to, because they first of all, when a kid quits a tournament, it screws up their tee times. It screws up all kinds of things. So they're really glad that we've kind of set this standard. But, we're down to a 1% problem now. Even if it's a 2% problem, how do you fix that last 2%? It's kind of like, the only way you can do it is shine a light on it by putting an NC or a WD on a kid's record.
Well, you really only see it at the highest events.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do, Mac.
You don't see it at AJGAs, not reported.
Well, you see withdrawals. You see withdrawals with a fake injury.
Yeah.
Listen,
unfortunately, I think it's out there. Unfortunately, I think it's out there in almost every level. And you definitely see it at the AJGA levels, and you'll see it at the Hurricane level. You'll see it when it matters. We see it at MB3. I mean, we see it when it matters, and unfortunately, it's mostly because the parents are.
Yeah, there's. Believe me, other than. I mean, it's an impossible situation because there are kids that do get hurt, by the way.
Yeah,
and
that's
have
right.
to withdraw. And what are you gonna? You're gonna give them a negative, like is a scarlet letter? I mean, that's the impossible part about it. I mean, if you're a good actor, I mean, there's no way to know if someone's sick or if they're hurt or what it is. So I'm not suggesting that there's a way around it, and it is. I mean, like you said, it's 14,000 kids that we're talking about. We're talking about a small number, but it does exist. And I guess my point more than that, Mac, was just how amazed are you with the power that Junior Golf Scoreboard has over junior golf, to where it got to the point where people are actually considering pulling out after 5 holes just because of Junior Golf Scoreboard.
That's tragic.
Yeah. I'm sure you didn't have that in mind when you started this.
No, I didn't have that in mind, but it's it happens. I mean, let's all admit it. It does happen. There are families, players that do it. But I also know that I get calls. One of the things that happens, I get calls from other parents, okay, that this is going on because they don't let their kids do it. They don't let their kids do it, and they think it hurts the quality of the competition and the caliber. And and the tour directors, for the most part, have a real incentive to protect the integrity of their competition. Mm-hmm. And so by reporting all that kind of stuff, so I think we're getting pretty good compliance. That we're at least getting it reported. Okay.
And I'll also point out that probably everyone can get away with one, just because you're going to get the benefit of the doubt from a college coach. Mm-hmm. I know several players that were top 150 players, top 100 players on JGS, and you'd see 3 or 4 WDs. I mean, basically, if they weren't going to shoot under par, it was a WD. And I know from talking with coaches, I see more than one, then I start to say, wait a minute here. Well, you have 4 WDs in one. I mean, your scores are great. You've shot 66 9 times, but you have 4 WDs. What's going on here? What is there an injury I need to know about? Like now you put it the other way. It is a bit of a scarlet letter if there's more than one. And actually, you're way better off. And the other thing we always hear from coaches that parents just refuse to listen to is coaches are more interested in how you handle yourself when things are going bad than when they're going good. And if you're going to quit after 4 holes because you made a triple, that will take you off their list if they see the WD. They'd rather see the 83 with 966s and say, hey, man, you had a bad day. It's golf. We all have bad days on golf. It's the toughest sport in the world.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree 100%. I agree. The best we try to do, you got a lot of different people holding tournaments. The best we kind of do is put a standard out there for these tournaments to report this when it happens. And then we write it down and put it on a kid's record. And the best we can do at the scoreboard, or anybody can do for that matter, is shine a light on the problem. Is just shine a light on that kid when they do it. And but we're dependent upon the tours and everybody reporting it. I mean, I've had more than one come to your maker meeting with tour directors because I'll get on their websites and they don't report a kid. I'll get on their websites and they have their scorecards on their websites, and I see these kids with partial scorecards. I'll go in and change it to a no card myself. Now, I've only done it a couple of times because I don't really want to get going on that direction because it's up to the tour. It's up to the tour to decide what they're giving that player. If they're going to give them a WD instead of a no card, if that's what they want to do, that's up to the tour. So when a parent calls and complains about it, I said, this is what the tour reported. You need to talk to the tour. Now, parents won't do that. You know why? Because they don't want to make the tour mad. And they want their kid to be able to get in that tour later. So it's an issue. It's an issue. But Ryan, you're right. There are people out there that are doing it, okay? And they're doing it hopefully not more than once. And hopefully we're doing as good a job as we can do to shine a light on it and put it right up on their tournament record so everybody can see it.
I'll throw this out there to both of you as we start to wrap this up, Mac. But are there ways that you guys are considering and throwing different ways around to improve Junior Golf Scoreboard as far as how the ranking system works, adding another variable? And Roger, is from your standpoint at the Junior Golf Hub, what other kind of variables is there anything else you'd like to see in Junior Golf Scoreboard? So Mac, I'll start with you. Are you considering adding any other variables?
We at the moment, no. The latest one we added was a course condition adjustment, which was added a year ago. Yeah, we did that. So we hear things from time to time, and I think over the years of doing the scoreboard, we've changed, modified, adjusted like 4 or 5 times. Like the weighting with 65%, 25%, we changed that. We changed a couple other variables. The CCA is another one we've done. So we're always open to adding variables. At the moment, we don't have any that we're considering, but when they come in and they're a good idea, trust me, I love good ideas, and I'm all for them.
How about you, Roger? What would if you had a magic wand? Is there anything you'd like to see that in your mind would improve our ranking system?
Ryan, that's a good question. I mean, I think I still go back to, I wish we had a way to implement where a player is in their development. So are they playing in an equitable or right event for them where they are? I know that's a very tough one in a tall order, but we have great ambition at PDI, my PDI, because I do think that there are a lot of players that get, overlooked because of just pure rankings versus what are their developmental skills, which is a whole different, conversation. But I think that the reality is that if we're looking at this as a developmental process for junior golfers, period, forget about the college placement side of it, but just as a pure golf development, I think it'd be ideally you'd have something around their player development, like our player development index. But at the same time, it's hard. I mean, it's really hard to kind of take into consideration all the factors of what you're looking for. Got to get the ball in the hole least amount of strokes possible. That's the name of the game.
Mac, one thing, Ryan, I'll give you one sidelight. A few years ago, and I did it twice. The AJGA did it once that I know of. They interviewed coaches and asked them where rankings stood in their hierarchy of decision making. And you hit it right on the head, Ryan, when you said that's the first thing. That's where they notice a kid or can check on a kid. But after that, all these other factors come into play. And Roger knows this, and you do too. What's the best fit? Where does the kid have a best fit? So coaches on the AJGA survey said 6th for rankings. On my survey, they said 7th. So in the final mix of decision making, not in maybe initially, but in the final, when it all came down to it, where you're ranked was like down the list as far as their recruiting.
I think I have a good question, Mac. Who do you view as your? I mean, obviously, it's a for-profit industry that's done very well. But who do you see yourself that you're here for college coaches, or are you here for junior golf families? Who do you serve?
In the beginning, when junior golf was an unknown sport, I mean, my son, when he went and played for Northwestern, played with Luke Donald on that team, and you had to know a parent who knew about a tournament, who could get you a copy of a paper application, that you put a check in an envelope and you sent it in. Roger's nodding his head. He knows what it was like. And it was impossible. So we decided that we build a system that would help the undiscovered junior player get discovered, and for the college coach to find that undiscovered player. That was the founding, that was the founding principle, still is today. So we're serving both those constituencies. But also, as a side part, we're serving a lot of junior tournament as well, because they want to be included. There are numerous tournaments that use the Junior Golf Scoreboard as an eligibility to be invited to their tournament. Scott Robertson's an example of that.
Yeah.
So, well, that's kind of a side benefit, but really it was for the help. It was help those junior players get discovered and coaches to find them. That was the founding principle. Still is today.
So it really, you were really thinking of the college coaches, giving them an outlet to be able to find players was kind of the initiative.
Yeah, I think that actually, to be honest, it was more pure than that. It was in the beginning. It was a great sport. My son played it. We met a lot of great people. It was getting no publicity. Nobody knew how to get into tournaments, and it just was. This is a game of honesty, integrity, and discipline. That's what it's about. There's no referees out there. There's no umpire. It's a great sport. Okay, so we decided in the beginning to bring the sport to the forefront. That was part of the original part of it, and then in the end, and then to help families like us who were trying to scramble around. That was originally an initiative. The coach part of it came because my son was in the middle of the recruiting process. Hey, we can help coaches too. So coaches were really the second reason, and right close behind the families, but it was the second reason.
Yeah, I mean, getting back to how it could be improved, if it ultimately is to try to get kids an opportunity and be discovered, I would go back to Roger's point, and I don't know how you do this. I mean, everyone has ideas, but then how you actually get it implemented. But if you would look at, Roger makes a great point that, a golf score, how you got it in the hole is a good starting point. But if it's for a college coach, ultimately they're probably more interested in upside. They're more interested in, how big you are, how tall you are, how fast you are, how far you can hit it, things along those lines. From a pure recruiting service, that kind of stuff is probably important to them that you don't find on there. But I don't know. Like I said, it's easy to say, well, everyone should have their their PDI ranking or their height, weight, and how big their parents are and their uncle. And, it's amazing how many coaches we talk to, Mac, that say they're most interested now in how far a kid hits it, and they'll figure everything else out under their tutelage at their university. So, certainly distance and speed and athleticism, as you know, from your son to where it is today, this game of golf is quickly getting some of the best athletes in the world playing golf instead of other sports.
Oh, that's so true. And it's so true. I think the higher ranked Division I team it is, the more likely they're to take that stance. But there's over 290 Division I teams. There's some fabulous Division III schools that you can go to academic. It does, and have a great experience with less intensity and still play the game you love. Right. And when you start moving down the list, that stuff tends to be it also depends on how the coach recruits. I won't get into all that because there's styles of recruiting with coaches is all over the board. Right.
Yep.
Okay? You got the proactive coach, and then you got the passive coach, what I call coaches who desk recruit. Right. So, it's all over the board, but you're right. There are a lot. We've had at least 2 this year. I think 2, and I've seen 3 in the last 2 years. Kids shoot 61.
Wow.
On a 6,700-yard golf course.
Yeah.
One of them was a 14-year-old.
Yeah. Pretty impressive.
You talk about, we have all the data for Ricky Fowler. We have all the data for Jordan Spieth. We have all the data for Justin Thomas. We have all that data, okay, which we're beginning to help somebody use. So, but these kids, this is a whole new, the cream of the crop in this graduation year. Maybe not the 23 so much, but the 24s and 25s. Whew, it's there's some real. There's some kids that can just flat out play.
Yeah.
It's coming even more. You see all these young players that they've got their coaches, they've got their physical coaches, they're working on their mental coaches. To Ryan's point, we were talking to several college coaches, and they all talk about they're looking for speed, they're looking for athletes. So it's definitely changing. The landscape's changing.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Mac, certainly a wealth of information here. We know our audience is excited to hear from you and hear from what has gone into the ranking system. As if you play junior golf, you are certainly aware of the Junior Golf Scoreboard. So we really appreciate you taking so much time with us this morning, giving us the genesis behind building what is now the gold standard of rankings in junior golf from top to bottom. And certainly we appreciate it. I'll give you a chance for members of our audience that are new to the game. How do they get on Junior Golf Scoreboard and take advantage of the service?
Well, we have a really hard URL to remember. It's called www.juniorgolfscoreboard, all spelled out, all one word.com. Okay, so it's that there you are, and just you go through the menu bar and you just find the things. There's a lot on our site, by the way. Besides that, I think Roger probably knows this, that if you go to rankings and honors, one on the list is college signings, and we have a whole list for the last 4 or 5 years of kids and where they've gone to school. We don't have everybody; we're pretty close. Girls and guys. And so if you want to see what schools are signing what kids and what their talent was when they signed them, that's a great resource. That's just one little element we have on our website.
Very cool. Well, Mac, from Roger and myself, thanks again so much. It was a really great conversation. We appreciate your time.
Thanks very much. Mac. Have a great day.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks, Mac. Good seeing you. All right.
Well, Roger, there you go. Hear it straight from the guy that invented this system. It was a really good conversation. At least we certainly have an idea of what the thought was when it all started, and certainly where it is today.
Yeah, no doubt. And I do think the idea behind it was pure in the sense of having gone through it, like yourself, like myself. We've gone through this process with our kids, and just trying to figure out what to do is very difficult. And if you're starting from ground zero, having a resource like the JGS is fantastic, which is, again, back to why I created Junior Golf Hub, because there's other aspects of this that people just don't understand about, what do I need to do, beyond. So it's really good. It was very informative.
Absolutely. So, as we talk about how to improve the system, and Mac seems to be open to it, obviously there is a day where I personally believe, my partner Nota Begay believes that PDI is going to be part of a ranking system. If this system is ultimately to help college coaches, there would be no other metric that you could add that would be more important than PDI. I actually think it would become as important as how many strokes it took to get the ball in the hole, just because athleticism is becoming such a huge part of this game of golf. So we certainly can hope, Roger. We know that there's always the wheels are always turning, and there's always changes that are coming. But I think you would agree that would be, in my mind, the missing part of this equation that would really put it over the top.
Yeah, no doubt. I would agree with that, Ryan. It's kind of why I created it, because, again, you see a lot of good, talented players out there, and you start to think about, okay, what is the potential going forward? And I think that's really what you're trying to – it's kind of what college coaches are always looking for. It's what parents are looking for. It's what players want to know about themselves, which is, what is my potential? And how do you measure that? So, PDI is a way of trying to measure that potential. And I think to the point of the athleticism that gets, captured there, is a coach then can relate to, well, his swing speed is X, but yet he does these things really well. Hey, his potential is going to only get better. So, which is what we've seen over the years.
Junior Golf Scoreboard is really, really good at identifying the top 100, 150 players in that class. There's probably not much of a mistake there as far as 1 through 150. I mean, those guys are playing the biggest events. Those girls are playing the biggest events, and they're playing well in the biggest events. What's interesting is from 151 to 601. The difference between 151 and 601, it's a couple strokes. I mean, it's a couple of weighted tournaments. There really is when you get to that number, you're not, 151, you're a very, very good player. 601, you're a very good player. But for a coach to decide between those 500 players, everyone kind of looks the same. And that's where your PDI score, if you're 451, but your PDI score is off the charts, I think you move to the front of the line, just as if you're 151, but for whatever reason, some of things out of your control, genetics, whatever, your PDI score it would show that you may have maxed out. You're doing a great job for the gifts that you've been given, and 151 is an amazing accomplishment. But are you ever going to get a whole lot better than that? You may, a credit to you, you may have absolutely gotten the most out of your game to that point, whereas someone at 501 that is, dealt with some huge growth spurts and some other different things that have contributed to maybe hitting, playing in the mid to high 70s, but there are signs that, some metrics that would prove from PDI that some really potential is there. To me, that's the missing link. I'd love to see PDI be a part of Junior Golf Scoreboard, Roger.
Yeah, so would I definitely, Ryan. That's exactly what we're talking about, which was, how do I separate a good player potentially tapped out to a potential player who hasn't reached, their strength, kind of their stride yet. I mean, that late bloomer is the one that's usually going to take home the most trophies, right? I mean, and in the end, and if you go back and you look at the top 500 ranked players, you start to recognize that where did they go 5 years? What happened to them? They went to college, and what happened? How many of them come out on the other side, or even stayed in college and were successful? And again, it's not a knock on them. It's just what they knew. They just didn't develop themselves in the entirety. So I think it is important to think about what are your actual goals?
Well, great conversation for sure. We hope you enjoyed it. We've got some unbelievable guests still to come on the Hub of Junior Golf podcast. So be sure to continue to check the catalog. If you missed some of the great college coaches or great interviews we've had to date, be sure to go back on the catalog on the emails you receive and check it out. So for Roger Nick, I'm Brian Burr. For Michael Nick, our producer and director, this has been the hub of Junior Golf Podcast.